They thought the tests were routine. But when Canada's Gripen trials started producing results no one expected, the Pentagon quietly began to worry. In the icy expanse of northern Canada, under skies that stretch endlessly toward the Arctic, a new kind of fighter test was underway. No headlines, no flashy announcements, just cold air, radar silence, and a jet that wasn't supposed to make the Americans nervous, but did. The Saab Gripen E, a lightweight, affordable Scandinavian fighter, running trials on Canadian soil. On paper, it was just part of a long list of contenders for Canada's next-generation fighter program. But behind closed doors, U.S. officials were watching closely. Too closely. Because if the results of those tests were accurate, it meant one uncomfortable truth. A $60 million Swedish jet might be outperforming America's $100 billion F-35 program in some of the toughest combat conditions on Earth. For decades, the United States has controlled the skies of the Western world. Every NATO defense deal, every Allied air fleet, orbiting around American technology, American systems, American permission. And Canada has always been a loyal partner in that order. Its Royal Canadian Air Force has flown American fighters since the Cold War, the CF-18 Hornet being the most recent workhorse, still flying missions after nearly 40 years of service. So when Ottawa launched its long-awaited competition to replace those aging Hornets, the world assumed the outcome was already written. The F-35 Lightning II, America's stealth crown jewel, would win, like always. But then came Sweden. Saab's offer wasn't just another sales pitch. It was a challenge. A challenge to the idea that advanced air power needs to come with billion-dollar price tags and Pentagon-approved software. The Gripen E represented something that made Washington deeply uncomfortable: independence. This jet was designed for nations that couldn't rely on superpower protection. It could take off from highways, refuel in 10 minutes, and fly again with a skeleton crew. It didn't need U.S. codes, U.S. maintenance, or U.S. permission. For a country like Canada, vast, isolated, and surrounded by Arctic uncertainty, that kind of self-reliance was a dream. And so, the tests began. At first, the Pentagon didn't think much of it. Gripen was smaller, slower, less famous. No stealth coding. No billion-dollar logistics cloud. But when the Canadian evaluation team started running simulations, high-latitude radar tracking, electronic warfare performance, dispersed operations, something didn't add up. The Gripen wasn't supposed to win these scenarios. And yet, time and again it did. In cold weather flight trials, it handled Arctic turbulence with ease. Its systems didn't freeze or glitch the way heavier, more complex jets did. In electronic warfare tests, its Erexis suite jammed simulated threats so effectively that Canadian analysts reportedly described the data as unexpectedly superior. And in one of the most telling moments, during mock engagements modeled after NORAD defense patterns, the Gripen's networked sensors identified threats faster than the simulation expected, sometimes before Allied radars even tracked them. That's when eyebrows started raising, not in Canada, but in Washington. To understand why this alarmed the Pentagon, you have to understand the system behind the system. The F-35 isn't just a jet, it's a network. Every mission, every upgrade, every spare part, all routed through a centralized US-controlled data chain. That gives Washington strategic leverage over every F-35 user, from NATO allies to Pacific partners. Now imagine a NATO nation choosing an aircraft that doesn't feed into that network. A fighter that uses its own mission software, its own data link, and its own logistics chain. For the Pentagon, that's not just lost business, it's lost control. So when Canada's Gripen testing started revealing that a non-US fighter could outperform in key Arctic missions, it wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a geopolitical wake-up call. Critics had laughed at the idea before. They said the Gripen E couldn't compete with the stealth and computing power of the F-35. They called it too small for the big leagues. But in the real world, in cold, rugged, unpredictable terrain, the small jet was proving exactly why it mattered. It was faster to deploy, cheaper to maintain, and, maybe most importantly, it gave its operators complete freedom. While the F-35 needed its global logistics backbone to stay flying, the Gripen could keep operating off a frozen highway with 6 ground crew and a fuel truck. For countries defending large remote areas like Canada or Finland, that was everything. One Swedish engineer described it best: "The Gripen doesn't ask for permission, it just takes off." Then came the turning point, the part that truly caught the Pentagon's attention. According to defense insiders, one of the Gripen's classified sensor trials produced electronic warfare data that exceeded projections. It simulated radar behavior in a way that could trick advanced tracking systems, including some similar to those used by NATO. And if that capability proved real, it meant the Gripen E could survive, even thrive, in contested airspace against systems built to stop stealth fighters. In other words, it could fight smarter, not richer. Suddenly, the Swedish jet wasn't just a budget-friendly alternative. It was a problem. Word began spreading quietly among Allied air officers. They'd seen the data. And while the US was still publicly confident, the private tone had shifted. What if more NATO countries followed Canada's example? What if nations realized they could build strong air forces without tying themselves to US infrastructure? Because once you break that pattern, the whole system changes. In the end, Canada still announced the F-35 as its chosen fighter. Politics, pressure, and promises all lined up exactly as expected. But behind that official decision, those Gripen trials left a mark, one that still lingers in defense briefings and Pentagon discussions. Because the tests didn't fail, they succeeded too well. And that success revealed something uncomfortable: that smart design and tactical flexibility can sometimes outmatch brute force spending. The Pentagon might not say it out loud, but deep down, they know. Sweden proved a point that money can't erase. Today, as Canada prepares to receive its first batch of F-35s, there's a quiet irony hanging in the air. The very tests meant to compare the two jets ended up showing how much the smaller nation understood about modern warfare. It's not about who builds the biggest plane, it's about who builds the one that can actually adapt. The Gripen E showed that true power isn't in size, but in strategy. And that's exactly what makes the Pentagon nervous. Because if allies start realizing they don't need America's billion-dollar systems to defend themselves, then the balance of power, both military and political, begins to shift. From Ottawa to Washington, from Stockholm to Brussels, the echoes of those tests are still being felt. They revealed that in the age of sensors, data, and precision, agility matters more than arrogance. And maybe, just maybe, the future of air power won't belong to the loudest superpower, but to the quietest genius. In the end, the Pentagon didn't fear the Gripen because it was better. They feared it because it was independent. And in a world built on control, nothing is more dangerous than freedom.